So an alarming development's happening over the holidays, as we were obviously happy about the fact that the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine had been approved by the FDA. The actual rollout of this is not going well. Let's throw this up there from CBS News. Millions of doses of the vaccine are falling short. Now, the CDC and others had promised that by late December, they were going to vaccinate 20 million Americans. Now they're changing that to make doses available to 20 million Americans. The actual number and the reporting there is actually not clear, as I understand it, in terms of the number that actually shows up there on the screen. I actually talked to some people who work in this space. But as we can see now, the number is not anywhere close to 20 million.
Right.
It's maybe around like 10 million, maybe, 11. But still, what the hell is happening? Here's the second and biggest problem, is that due to a number of factors, bad distribution by states, lack of plan by the federal government, and apparently a huge number of healthcare workers that are saying, I don't even want the vaccine, a number of doses are now actually set to expire. There are a lot of these doses which are sitting now in fridges, which will expire if they're not used by a certain period of time, and there's no distribution plans within each of these states in order to make those doses available, maybe to the elderly population or to different, nursing home, health cares, and others. We're having basically 50 different experiments across the country, which is not what you want.
And
you don't want that. They're all going bad.
None of them are going well.
Like,
I mean, that's the thing is, God, it's just a failure on every single
federal,
level.
State, local.
And this is another place where, I allowed myself to feel a little bit of hope that maybe we'd be able to, because it was such a critical situation, because surely everyone recognized how critical it was to get these doses out and get them administered as quickly as possible, that we would figure this thing out to some reasonable proximity of competence. And it's just federal government's a disaster. Every single state is a disaster. And when you talk about doses expiring or not going out in a timely fashion, you're talking about that equates directly to sickness and death. That's the level of unconscionable that you're talking about here.
With the actual cost of incompetence.
Yes,
yeah.
And I literally can't wrap my head around it. I've been doing as much reading and research as I can about why this is happening in state after state. I still haven't been able to come up with any sort of satisfactory answer. Look, partly they're cash-strapped because they haven't gotten enough aid from the federal government. There has been some money, though, put into vaccine distribution, so it's partly that federal government fault. It's partly that there wasn't an effective plan put in place from the federal government. And that's partly each of these states is coming up with their own way to fail. New York, which obviously really hard hit by COVID, has been one example of dramatic disaster. Cuomo just announced they're going to put even more layers of bureaucracy in place in terms of vaccine distribution. You can see here, New York City has fallen dramatically behind where there's the pace of where they are supposed to be. They're going to have to administer about 50,000 vaccine doses per day to keep up with the anticipated supply through July 31st, according to Nate Silver. Instead, they're just administering it, weekdays when they feel like it. Little sense of urgency here. I really can't understand it whatsoever.
What are you doing? You're giving people holidays? Are you out of your mind? This thing has a shelf life. Literally, it has a shelf life. There is an expiration date. And then, look, even I support what's going on in Texas and in Florida. You give it to the elderly first, and then you start from there on the way down. But there are these crazy lines, and there are old people who are lined up in cars overnight waiting to get their vaccine. Look, this is a total disaster. And even though I think that in the long run is going to turn out to be the morally correct choice, is vaccinate the elderly first, then you can worry about healthcare workers and everybody else, that ultimately that this is terrible, because once again, there's no plan from the federal government. And then I was reading that some of these state health departments are so strapped because A, they've run out of money, B, they've been dealing with COVID now for almost a year, so they're already exhausted. And now they were like, oh, wait, it's our job? And actually, it's a logistics nightmare, because let's say you're one of those states where you have to take the vaccine delivery from the federal government and then give it to nursing homes. You're the one who knows your nursing homes. A lot of these people just go in there and then dropping them off. And now some of these people who work in these nursing nursing homes don't want to take the vaccine. Or even the elderly population, some of these people are saying, I don't want the vaccine. But the healthcare workers one is what's driving me crazy. I'm like, what is wrong with you? There are so many people who are refusing to take it. A lot of them are saying, like, and I'm sure I'll get some pushback on this one, right? Which is, what is wrong with you? They're like, I don't want, look, there have been 4 cases out of millions or whatever of actual, real adverse effects. Many of these people, apparently you don't feel good for one day, or second day you get a high fever or something like that. Okay, fine. I mean, and again, half the deaths here are occurring in nursing homes.
Yeah.
If you work in a nursing home and you're refusing to get this vaccine, I don't even know what to say to you.
Yeah,
I really don't.
You shouldn't be working
You should
there.
be fired.
I mean, that's the truth. I do want to see less anecdote, and this is a hard thing to get. Fewer anecdotes and more hard numbers about exactly how many are refusing, because I don't want to create this
we
whole
don't have
other
a centralized reporting system. We have no idea. The CDC data lags days. Yeah.
Another great point.
Yeah.
Something we covered when you were out.
Right.
Both CNN and MSNBC did these segments that were like, okay, well, why are we doing so much worse than other countries? And they're like, well, these other countries have nationalized health systems.
Oh, really?
Oh, really? It's almost like we just had this gigantic debate about how that might be a better direction to go in, and you people were complicit in destroying the idea and carried water for the health insurance industry in protection of their interests. Interesting that now that that's completely off the table, you're willing to grant that may have had some upsides here. So that is part of the issue, is it's completely decentralized. It's 50 states plus the territories all on their own. And federal government failures at every single level, which has really been the story of the past year. COVID was always going to be brutal, right? It was always going to be tough. Every country in the world has struggled with it, but not every country has failed on every single metric like ours have.
Yeah.
The failure of the initial response, the failure of the stimulus, and now, the cherry on top, the failure of the vaccine distribution. I should have known.
Here's the thing. You got to sprint towards this vaccine, because that new strain of COVID out in the UK their cases just went vertical. This is from France 24. New strain of COVID-19 has tripled infections. And remember, even the UK is actually locked down. Now, a lot of evidence, especially now that we see with the lockdowns in California, that they may not be even the best mitigation strategy. But reality is here, this strain is here. We've already had a case of it here in the United States. We usually lag international by around a month and a half. That's how exponentiality works. And so a month and a half now, if this vaccine if vaccine rollout continues to be a disaster and this new strain goes vertical, I mean, you could be looking at months more of this. And then you have people out there who are in the healthcare industry, nursing homes, who don't want to take it. I don't even have any words for that.
Yeah, you make a really good point, which is that the worst thing that can happen is for the virus to become more infectious, because that contributes to exponential growth, because every one carrier infects more people and they infect more people, and that's how exponential growth works. Whereas actually, if it became more deadly, I mean, that would be horrific as well, but you would talk about linear growth in terms of the number of deaths, and you actually might even have some mitigating effects, because if you're getting more sick from it, you are less likely to go out, you're less likely to infect more people. So very dangerous developments, and very disappointing that this is going so poorly thus far.
That's right.
More Rising for you after this.